I'm thankful to the Fortis team for doing this for us. Obviously, they are the expert in this field. And having said this, we've been able to invite six of their very, very distinguished and I would say practitioners who will be with us every day from 5 to 6 p.m. Obviously, as a format, we want, which is we want to listen in from the expert's view, which is in today's case is Divya Jain. Welcome, Divya. Good to have you with us. And obviously, we want to devote now more of our time in terms of having your question being answered by the experts. Today as well, we will do the similar format. We have, as I said, Divya will take up the initial half, and after that initial half, we'll dive into, say, a good 30 minutes of Q&A. Okay, so the audience is building up, as I see, but more than that, we had a hard start at 5 o'clock, which we are now at. So I will quickly introduce formally to all of us Divya. Divya Jain is a sports and counseling psychologist with the Department of Mental Health and Behavioral Sciences with Fortis Healthcare, practicing in the field of mental health since 2010. Divya is the head of psychological services for the Fortis National Mental Health Program and is also a member of the Medical Commission of the Indian Olympic Association. She works with an eclectic approach towards the treatment of stress and lifestyles related mental health concerns, while also specializing in psychological skills training for performance enhancement and mentoring for elite and young sports persons. She has co-authored books on life skills for children and teenagers and Laugh and Learn with Dr. Parekh, a mental health comic book. Welcome, Divya. Over to you.
Thank you so much. Good evening, everyone. It is such a humbling experience to be amidst so many principals and teachers from school. Looking back, when I think about my life, my career, everything that I've achieved, and I'm a psychologist, so school there's hardly any psychology that's taught, right? It starts in the 11th and 12th grade. Most of the psychology we've studied is in college, undergrad, postgrad, and then the work that we've done. But if I was to look back and see what's made me the way that I am, what allows me to actually get up here and talk to so many principals and do the work that I do, is actually the experience that I had in my school, and not necessarily the experience just in the classroom of the school, because I was outside the classroom quite often. But just my big gratitude to all of you as educators, as principals, for shaping us and for making us who we are. And from my side, it was my math teacher in the 6th grade who thought I was the smartest kid in the class and always asked me that question, which made me feel very, very special. It was my English teacher who made me make a project on Harry Potter and encouraged me to read Harry Potter, which is an example I still use even now when I'm working with athletes. I use a lot of Harry Potter in sports psychology as well. It was my Interact Club teacher who taught me how to get up on stage and talk to people and organize events. It was my badminton coach who taught me the joy of playing. So I think school is not just about exams, and performance is not just about results. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. Like I said, I am a sports psychologist, so there'll be lots of sports examples and metaphors that kind of keep coming in the way. You'll have to bear with that. I think in today's world, there is so much focus on results, whether it's school students, whether it's parents, whether it's teachers, and can't really blame them because the entire environment has become that way, right? There's a few years back, there was 101% cutoff at some college in Delhi University. I mean, how do you reach there? What do you do? You get a 98.75% and you're struggling to get into the college of your choice, right? When I was in school, having tuitions was very, very rare. And people would be like, why do you need to take tuitions? And now if you don't have tuitions in the 3rd, 4th grade, people feel like you're a neglected child. So there's just so much pressure that keeps increasing, and that pressure that students are experiencing is increasing. And it's that complete 100% focus. It's in academics, of course, but sometimes it also translates into other spheres of life, whether it's You want to be a musician, you have to be the best musician. If you want to be a sports person, you have to be the absolute best sports person. You can't win a silver medal, you have to be a gold medalist. So that pressure, I feel, is something that's all around. In fact, to share with you, one of the first people I actually worked with when I started working about 10 years back um, was this lady, middle-aged lady, who was very, very stressed and anxious about her daughter. um, she was saying, I'm so worried, she's really slacking off, I don't know how she'll manage. It's such a competitive world, she's just not serious about her studies. And I asked her, are there any complaints from school? She said, no, school is fine, she's doing her homework, she's a quiet child, she goes to class, she doesn't misbehave, so that's fine. So I said, what about her homework? Yeah, homework is fine, everything is fine. So I said, then what is the problem? She said she doesn't enjoy going for tuitions, I have to push her. Okay, fine. uh, Anything else? And she said that we actually had a fight the previous day because I told my daughter that you should finish your entire syllabus for the year in your summer vacation. Use your summer vacation well so that for the rest of the year, you're actually ahead of the entire class. I felt a little like I was feeling the pressure myself. And then it struck me to ask her that, how old her daughter was. And her daughter was 6 years old. She was in grade 1, right? And that is the kind of pressure that she was experiencing. And it's not an unusual story. It's something that's happening, whether it's happening to you in the first grade or the third grade or the fifth grade, but it is something that is happening, where this culture of being so result oriented and having to beat those cutoffs and those deadlines is escalating to that extent. And I think somewhere what's happened is we've kind of lost sight of what learning and what examinations were all about. That exams aren't meant to just test our mathematics or our physics. Exams are meant to teach us how to cope with pressure. I feel like any event I do today, I actually tell myself, I was able to do my 12th exam board. I took it, I didn't panic. If I could take my 12th exam, board exam, I can do this. Like nothing is as daunting or as scary as that experience was. I still get nightmares sometimes. It's December and I haven't started studying for math and I have my board exam in 2 months. Uh, but it was made to help us deal with pressure because exams, performance is something that's a part of life. It will keep coming to us in different shapes and forms. It was meant to teach us how to organize ourselves. It was meant to teach us how to prioritize, how to be disciplined, how to work hard, how to learn certain things, how to cope with failures, how to cope with successes. And somewhere along the line, that entire experience, there's not time, there's not space for that experience to evolve. And that's something that I think all of us as adults, uh, parents, teachers, educators, society, mental health experts, all need to really think about to how we can balance that performance and results expectation that's there. And so when I work with whether it's school students for exams or whether it's athletes or working professionals for that matter, I tell them that in any situation, there are certain things in your control and certain things not in your control. What are the things that are not in your control? Your date sheet is not in your control. Which exam comes when is not in your control. Your syllabus is not in your control. How lengthy the paper is, it's not in your control. Your teacher's mood is not in your control. Your parents' mood is not in your control. Traffic is not in your control. Coming first is also not in your control, right? Being the best is not in your control. What are the things in your control? How much time you spend studying, how prepared you are, how much you've worked at what kind of lifestyle you've had, what kind of attitude you've had. I remember since the second or the first grade, I have always come second. And finally, in the 8th grade, the topper of my class left the school. He got a scholarship to go to Singapore. I was so excited. I was like, yes, finally, I'm going to come first next year. And just that year, another student took admission in my class. And she came first, I came second again. And that just never changed. Um, Coming first is not in our control, whether we like it or not, right? Can I work hard enough that hopefully if I put in all my efforts, maybe I come first? Yes, but the working hard part is in my control. Coming first is not in my control. If I come first in my school, what about the city? If I come first in my city, what about the state? What about the country? Where does it actually stop? So what's in our control is our effort, our attitude, the process that we follow. rather than the result that actually emerges. So when I work with players, there's the scoreboard is like a whole other opponent that's there. We're never actually as scared of our opponents as we are of that scoreboard. And people tell me, if I'm leading 20 to 10, I'm going to play a very attacking shot. If I'm losing 10 to 20, I'm going to play a very defensive shot. If I look at the score, I might get very confident. If I think I'm winning, I'm going to get very excited. If I'm losing, I'm going to get very sad. I'm going to get very anxious. But what happens in either of those cases is that if we're looking at the scoreboard, we are not looking at the ball. So ball is probably going to hit us in the face without us realizing, and we're not going to be able to actually perform to the best of our abilities. So if we look at the result is in the future. Or we're thinking about our past results, which is in the past. What is happening right now is actually the game that we need to focus on. It's our syllabus that we need to focus on. It's our opponents that we need to focus on. It's our technique that we need to focus on, right? And what that means is, if we're able to do that, if we're able to focus on the process of it, it keeps us in the present moment. It's not possible for us to be in the process and be thinking about the past or the future, right? And that's the kind of mind shift change that needs to be brought about. What that also does is it doesn't matter what forum you're performing at, right? Whether I'm talking in front of my classmates, whether I'm talking in front of a room full of people who are strangers, whether I'm playing gully cricket outside with my friends, or whether I'm playing the world championship, the only thing I care about is that next ball that's going to come. It doesn't matter to me where I am. It doesn't matter to me which country I'm playing in. It doesn't matter who I'm playing against. The only thing I can see is the ball coming in my direction. And the only thing I'm thinking of is where I need to hit that. And if I think about anything else, life is too fast. It's not going to wait. I won't get another chance to hit that shot again. It's going to go past me and I will have no idea what happened. So the only option I have is to actually be very much in the present moment. Other than the process, I think the other aspect, something that frankly, even I didn't give too much importance to earlier, is I think it's important for us to all be people whose effort is guided by our values. How do I feel about myself? What do I want to identify myself with? Would I like to think of myself as a hardworking person? Would I like to think of myself as someone who's consistent, someone who perseveres, someone who has a good sense of humor? Would I like to think of myself as someone who's honest, who's loyal, who's a good friend? What are someone who's responsible, right? And a lot of times we focus a lot more on the rules and regulations and expectations. But I think it'll be interesting to actually shift the focus slightly to the values that we would like to have, and to actually be able to see, can I be that kind of person? If consistency is important to me as a value, if I see myself as a consistent person, and as an educator, someone is able to show that to me, that this is what's important to you, there's more chance that I'm actually going to follow through on it and I'm going to do what it takes, because I have identified myself with consistency. If I identify myself as an honest person, I'm not going to cheat, right? If I don't, then all the proctors in the world can't stop me. I'll find some post-it note somewhere. I'll find a way. I'll do something. Kids are so creative when it comes to cheating. They'll do it in board games also, not just in their final exams. They'll do it anywhere. But I think if we can really tap into values, if that's a discussion that we can actually have with people, not as a moral judgment, but just in terms of the kind of person we would like to be, I think that's something that could be a very interesting conversation, and something that can really, really go a very long way. And the last aspect about just this performance and results aspect is how we deal with failures. I often ask the players I'm working with, if you're, let's say, if you're shooting and you're standing in front of this target and you pick up the gun and you have to shoot and it has to hit the bullseye, right? It's so far away, it's so tiny, it's next to impossible to see. But imagine if you could pick up the gun and shoot and it would hit the bullseye every single time. how long could you actually play for? You would be bored out of your mind. 2 months, 3 months, and you wouldn't be able to take it anymore. If everything you did turned out to be great, then there would be no joy in that greatness. You would be bored, right? The joy comes from the fact that it's difficult. The joy comes from the fact that it's a challenge and you won't be able to do it every time. So that when you do it, it's something that gives you a lot of satisfaction, which is why easy tasks don't motivate us a lot. We want something that's difficult. We want something that's challenging. And that's somewhere we need to also change people's attitude towards failures. So to give you an example, Sachin Tendulkar, right? No talk of mine is ever complete without the great Sachin Tendulkar, just a warning. His first one day, and he's someone who scored 100 hundreds. We're all aware. I've personally grown up watching him. His first one day international, he got out on zero. It was against Pakistan, 1989. Uh, and then he was dropped from the team for a few days, didn't play the next few matches. And then he came back, played another match. You know how much he scored? It was another zero, right? So that great career, that great international career started with 2 ducks. But fortunately, there were people in the team who realized that there's a lot more to life than a single result. And they gave him a chance and they didn't drop him from the team and he played the next match. And the rest is history. Imagine if he had given up. Imagine if others around him had given up. You gave him 2 chances, he didn't do it. We wouldn't have a Sachin Tendulkar. And frankly, if we didn't have a Sachin Tendulkar, I don't know how much of what happened after that to Indian cricket would have also happened, because that kind of inspiration, where do you get that from, right? And so no one result, no one failure defines our life. We learn a lot more from failures than we do from successes. We learn a lot more from challenges than we do from easy moments. So as educators, just a few tips based on this that we should probably keep in mind. First is always focus on the effort. So when I work with an athlete and I ask them how their game went, they go for a tournament, they come back. They're not allowed to tell me whether they won or they lost. I'm not interested, because what would happen is they spend a month away in an exotic country playing a tournament, playing against the biggest names in the world. And when they come back, I ask them, how was your experience? They say, oh, I lost in the semifinals by this much. And your entire experience can't be capsuled into that one line of what score you had in your semifinal. I'm not interested. So they're not allowed to tell me. I said, I don't care if you won or lost. That's not what I'm going to hear. You tell me how you felt when you were taking the flight. You tell me how you were prepared. You tell me who you met, what you did, how you played, how you felt, where you struggled, where you triumphed, what your experience was. And it should last at least an hour or two. I'm not okay with these 2 lines. So whether we win or we lose is not something that is the only thing that we should focus on. Stories have to be about effort. Role models have to be about effort. Conversations about exams need to also be about effort. The second thing, as adults, and this can be as parents, as teachers, our attitude towards kids must not change based on the results that they have. So often what we notice is that when a child wins, they hang around with other people, they celebrate, everyone hugs them, takes them out for a meal. When a child loses, they isolate themselves. They sit on their own. Other people are also awkward talking to them. They may not get the same hug that they did. Even the adults' facial expressions are a little different. They're calmer, they're less expressive. And that's something that we need to make sure that we avoid doing. As adults, as people who are the secure base for these children, our attitude, our behavior should not differ based on whether they won or they lost. It should be the exact same, because winning and losing shouldn't matter. It's about how you played. So make sure that we still continue interacting with this child in the same way. Uh, I always make sure that celebration plans after the finals or after the tournament are decided beforehand. It can't be that if you win the tournament, you go out and you celebrate. If you lose the tournament, you're going to sit and do that. No, you would already decide which restaurant you're going to go to, who you're going to hang out with, what you're going to do, what kind of break you're taking. And that should not change come what may. So that no result seems so big that it changes anything. It's a part of life, right? This talk for me is an exam. It's a part of life. If I start changing all of my plans based on every exam I come across, I'm going to be in a lot of trouble. Third thing we do as educators, share experiences, but we share experiences of successes and failures. Otherwise, kids will think that we're preaching and they'll think that we think that we're know-it-alls. So places where we've struggled, where we've come out of it well, sometimes where we've not come out of it well, if it's taken us some time, so that they can relate to us, so they feel that we understand what's happening. We treat failures as opportunities to grow. I was listening to this lecture just yesterday, in fact, someone was talking about resilience. And what I came across was the fact that the Chinese word for crisis, the way it's written, it has two components. The first part is danger, and the second part is opportunity. And basically, a crisis, a difficult moment is an opportunity to grow. Mr. Obama's campaign manager had said, you can't waste a good crisis, because that's where most learning, that's where most growth happens. If there's no crisis, if there's no hardships, there's going to be no growth. And that's the attitude and the approach that we need to take. The next thing is, and this is something that's just not spoken about enough, and it's so basic, is that kids need to have fun. We need to encourage people to have fun no matter what they're doing. If they're studying, it needs to be fun. If they're playing a sport, it needs to be fun. I ask players, people are going for the Olympics, and I ask them, why do you play sports? And they just keep quiet, and they're like, I don't know, I'm supposed to. I don't know, my parents put me in the game. And I was like, okay, now think about the first time when you went to the playground and you picked up that sport. How did you feel? Why did you play? It was so much fun. That's what they say. And where did that fun go? It went in the burden of expectations, in the competitions, in the results, in the fear of failure. And that's something we need to remind them, that joy is so very important. If you want to be a successful player, you need to feel that same joy every single time. It's something that we talk about even now. 6 months and these people have not been on the field. 6 months and these kids have not been to school, right? And for the players who started resuming their game, I just asked them, how did you feel the first time you entered this ground again? And they were like, oh my God, I was just so grateful to have that opportunity to be there. It was just so much fun being there. And I was like, yes, please remember this feeling, because this is the feeling that's going to get you through, whether you're winning, whether you're losing, whether you're playing in the Olympics, whether it's your board exam, whether you're sitting at home. Enjoy it. If you enjoy it, it keeps you focused in the present moment. If you're having fun, if you enjoy dancing, if you enjoy singing, anything that you enjoy, when you're doing it, you will always be in the present moment. You'll never be thinking, oh my God, what will that person think? Oh, what happened yesterday? Or what will I do tomorrow? Or what about my presentation? No, you're as present as you can possibly be. And if you are present, you will do absolutely everything. And the last thing I would like to say is, no one aspect of our life should dominate us entirely. We need to make sure that kids participate in everything. They play every sport, they study also, they participate in extracurriculars also. I feel like sports, extracurriculars, they teach us life skills like very few other aspects of life can. These days, so even life skills have become textbooks, which is just so unfortunate. But these are the spaces, this is real life where people get to explore life and learn life skills. And so even if one thing doesn't go well, it's not the only thing that defines their identity. Even if you're a sports person, you still need to have other hobbies, other sports that you like to play, other activities. Even if you're someone who studies, you need to still play a sport, you need to still have an extracurricular activity, something to de-stress with, something to relax with, something that you enjoy, where success and failure doesn't matter. So just we need to make sure that kids just participate in absolutely everything. They stay active, they stay engaged, they have good, strong bonds with friends, with family members, and they're not scared to try new things out and new experiences. On that note, I think I'll end my bit here, and we can probably have a discussion now if there's anything you all would like to say or ask me.
Yes. Wonderful, Divya. I think you were very, very, uh, I would say, what should be the best way of putting it? Simple yet effective, I would say. That's the way it should be. And anything which is simple to understand is far more effective to me. Okay, so very well done. I think I have a series of questions which will now cover. Roshni Khatri, if you can unmute yourself and ask the question, please go ahead.
Very good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Good evening, ma'am.
Ma'am, my question to you is I recently had an experience, a real life experience with one of my students. We had some quiz competition in the school, and it was an online, being a virtual classroom scenario these days. The child is of an average performance, but in the real classroom she was not very active and interactive the way she's been doing in the online classes. She's the most energetic, the most reflective, and the open minded child. Her performance has grown, has taken altogether a pave the high skies, but and also she stood first in the competition.
Mhm.
But once the competition was over, I got to know that she stood first. I called her. I congratulated her that I'm so proud. You've brought laurels to the school, to everyone. And as your teacher, it gives me a lot of happiness to see our student emerging and growing. She was very happy. She said, "Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much," and this and that. I'm also equally happy. And just after 10 minutes, I get a message from her. She says, "Ma'am, I'm really upset that I have let you down." I said, "In what manner? You stood first, you brought laurels to me, I'm happy. Why are you saying so?" She said to me in just one single sentence, "Ma'am, that I cheated with a few questions."
Mm.
I was not very confident, so I Googled, and that's how I think probably I stood first. So I don't want the certificate, I don't want anything. All I want is, I'm confessing. And if you can, just bear with me, ma'am, but I assure you that from next time, because I'm feeling really guilty, what I did, I have never done it so far in my life ever, but I really regret for my deed. I tried to calm her down. I was like, "Okay, beta, all that you have said, accepted. And the best part, I'm happy more than that you scored first. I'm happy to hear that you
Exactly.
have realized where you went wrong." That
Exactly.
brings immense happiness to me. That's the peak experience for me, and it should be ideally for you as well. But being you as a sport expert, ma'am,
Mm.
what advice would you like to share with me so that I can also be, a part of the information and share it with the child? That what could have been another way of empowering the child to let her or him know that whatever he did was wrong, but at the same time, now that it has already happened, we can't go back in the past. Like you said, we should live in here and now because we have a control over that, now not
Mm.
over what is already gone. So I would
Right.
just want to take from you, ma'am, what would be your piece of advice in this scenario?
Um, so I take this as a story of victory, not as a story of loss. And I think it's
Absolutely.
wonderful that your student had such a fantastic relationship with you that they were able to say this to you. I think this is a win. It's an absolute win. It's what we were talking about, where effort is guided by values, right? And yes, this child made a mistake, and that's okay. And I think focusing on the fact that they confessed is also, and the fact that we're even more proud of them for being able to do that than actually coming first, I think is remarkable. And I think we asked them, okay, how would you like to go about it now? And if they would actually like, if they've suggested returning that award, that's something we should also encourage. We should tell them that yes, you're feeling guilty right now, and that's probably because you realize somewhere in your that it's not matching your values and what you want to be. And let's use this as a moment that you feel is a growing moment, and let's write to them, and let's accept it. And that's going to make you a much much stronger person than you've ever been before. And I'm going to be with you throughout this process, and I'm very very proud of you. I think that's what I would encourage this person to do. And I think what you did was absolutely wonderful. Too.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Madhuri Arora, your question?
Yes. Good evening, everyone. I'm Madhuri from Happy Days School, and my question as well as worry is that nowadays I have seen there are many curriculums and books available for teaching life schools, and schools are imposing and we can say they are using that books and that lesson plans for teaching life skills. So my worry is that life skills should not be academic based or bookish or lesson based. This is my question also ki, as teacher, do all of you think, or ma'am, Divya ma'am, do you suggest ki there should be any books or particular curriculum for teaching life skills? Please ma'am.
So I certainly don't think there should be exams on life skills if we can help it. But I think it's a balance. I think it's good to acknowledge that life skills are important. And I feel like life skills is something that needs to pervade all aspects of what happens in the school experience. Whether it's something on the playground, whether it's something that happens on stage, whether it's students' experiences in the classroom, whether it's even events that are happening outside in the community. Some news breaks out. I know as teachers, it's difficult because there's so much syllabus to cover. But frankly, if teachers can even just have conversations on that, hey, this happened in the news. What is your thought about it? What do you all feel about it? That's a way of bringing about critical thinking. That's a way of bringing about communication as well. Also being able to debunk a lot of myths, whether it's interactions in the classroom, whether there are fights and conflicts happening. All of these are spaces to build in life skills. And while it's good to be able to have a vocabulary to be able to talk about those life skills, I think that the way we teach it is important. It needs to not be taught as a subject necessarily or something that needs to be marked and graded, but it's something that definitely needs to be prioritized. And if a lot of it needs to be experiential learning, whether that's in the form of activities that are done in groups. A lot of these manuals will have activities and brainstorming ideas and things like that. I don't think it's so much as learning the definition of empathy or learning the definition of critical thinking. But yes, if there are certain activities that we can do, structured activities, as well as things that just emerge from day-to-day life, the important thing is to just prioritize life skills education and development.
Thank you ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you. You're on mute.
Should I ask a question?
Yeah, ma'am. Please go ahead.
Okay. My question to you is that should we hold competitions? Should we, because everyone puts their best effort. They do a lot of practice and they really work hard. But at the end, I'm just talking about especially small children, primary, pre-primary and primary. And when the result comes, some of them are obviously very happy and they try to do much better next time because they want to get the prizes or medals again. But the ones who are unable to, they go home crying, and then next time they don't feel that excited to take the competition again. So what should we do in that? In general, what should be done about it? Thank you.
So I think competition is a part of life. I don't think that we can be in an environment that's completely non-competitive, because if kids don't learn to compete, then they're also going to struggle when they move forward. Of course, what our learning goals would change with age. And I'm sure you're all better experts at that than I am. Pre-primary is probably too young to have competitions and to have first, second, third. But I definitely think that the focus needs to be on our preparation, our effort. Even if we are having competitions at any stage, it's about what we reinforce within that competition. So it's not just about who comes first, who comes second, and clapping for people who have done that. It's about each person's individual journey. How much effort did you put in to that competition? Where did you start from? Where did you end? And the competition always has to be with ourselves. Any situation, even if there is an actual outside rank and there is a first, second, third, that's not something that we should really focus on a lot. It should be a lot about what my individual journey has been, where I came from, what my strengths were, how much more I've been able to work on that, how much I've been able to push myself. What did I learn? Did I enjoy it? Did I enjoy studying that? Did I enjoy reading that? Did I enjoy running as fast as I could? Did I run as fast as I could? So it's not so much A, for competition, the age definitely needs to be looked at. But B, also what we reinforce after the competition, I think is a lot more important. That winning and losing don't matter. If you're someone who scored a 40% last time and you've reached 60% this time, then you're a winner and more successful than someone who's gone from an 80% to an 82%, in a sense, right? And so it's learning to be your own benchmark and pushing yourself and enjoying competition. I think competition is there, it's a part of us, and we should enjoy that challenge, but we should look at it as a challenge, not as a threat. That what if I lose? What if I fail? What if I don't come first? That conversation, that self-talk is something that we need to ensure doesn't develop. And that will happen if there's a effort focus. We focus on our effort, we focus on ourselves, the what ifs will not come.
But should we hold those annual prize distribution functions for these small children?
I think if we're giving prizes, we should give as many prizes to as many kids as possible. Whether it's badges, whether it's prizes, I think everyone should get one for something or the other. I know it's not necessarily very practical, but if I had my way, I'd say that every kid should be celebrated. And I think we should focus a lot more on building strengths and focusing on strengths rather than focusing on weaknesses. A lot of times if someone is strong in one area and weak in one area, we keep pushing them on strengthening their weakness. And that's something that really impacts our confidence in not a very good way, because it makes us feel a little less in control. So I feel like each child's strengths need to be celebrated. And yeah, it's a tricky question, but I think we should, if we are giving prizes, then we should find a way to give prizes to everyone.
Thank you.
Dr. Sharma, you have a question?
Yeah, I must. Divya, I was just having a query that you were, remembering your school days.
Yes.
So can you share that how the pressure, because you were telling now we are talking of stress-free examination, education should be absolutely, stress-free. How does it matches? Because stress is there, competition has to be there, the child has to face it tomorrow.
Yes.
So how do we deal with that? And it's really the parents' pressure,
Yes, absolutely. Stress is a part of life, right? And exams also need to be a way, and competitions need to be a way of ensuring that kids learn how to deal with that pressure. If we talk about having no exams and no competitions and no winning, losing, then these kids will not survive once they come out of school, because there is a lot of competition, there is a lot of pressure. They need to be able to learn how to deal with the anxiety. What we need to do is we need to teach them the right attitude, and that attitude is something that they'll be able to control no matter what situation they come up with. And so, like I told you, I'm a sports psychologist, right? For me, it is about the gold medals. I will not say that to a lot of people, but my eventual end goal is also to make sure that we win as many gold medals as we can. And nowhere in my conversation will I ever feel like, no, it's okay if we, but it's about what we choose to focus on. It's about what happens if we do. I'll be a lot more disappointed if that player doesn't give their best, because I know that if they give their best, they'll win. They have it in them. Most players at the top level, their ability levels are very similar. It's their attitude and what happens to them. So if I want to win, and if I focus all my energies on winning, I'll stop focusing my energies on playing, and I will lose. So I
Yeah.
have to force myself to focus on the process if I want the result. Something I also learned from Harry Potter book 1. I don't know if any of you have read it. But yeah, so yes, we need to have competitions. We need to enjoy competitions. We need to enjoy pressure. Stress is a part of life. We need to enjoy the stress. I mean, to understand how boring life would be if there was no stress.
Especially now that because parents are very overprotective, everywhere. They want to be hedge everywhere. They want to come in front. And that is where I also get scared, because being a teacher and counselor myself, I really feel that how will they deal tomorrow? And
Yes.
how that is where how do you convince the parent?
It's become quite the football match, hasn't it? And unfortunately, it's like the parents and the teachers are on two different sides, and the child becomes the football by the
Yeah.
end of it, and that's unfortunate. Ideally, parents and teachers should be on the same level. I think what we just need to also realize that parents also have anxiety, and this is them and their anxiety, and there's so much pressure on. Like there was pressure on being the best student, there's also pressure on being the best parent, and that just kind of is something that just stays with us. I think we just need to strengthen communication. We need to accept the anxieties that parents have, but we need to be able to stick to our values and our belief systems and do what we're doing, and be able to absorb a lot of the anxiety that the parents will also bring up.
Thank you, Divya. Thank you so much. So nice of you. Thank you, Mr. Gaurav.
Thank you, sir.
Mute myself. Yeah, Balasubramaniam, your question, please. And then I have a question on the chat I'll share with you.
Good evening, Divya ma'am.
Good
It's a
evening.
wonderful session over stress. So could you suggest that what all positive stress that is very much required for the child to cope up, and the other external stress which they can avoid it? So the external pressures, normally parents, peer group, these all pressures comes because they compare with the other child also. He is doing very well, why you are not doing? So such cases, how the child can cope up, what the teacher or the school management or as a principal, we can counsel the child. So it will help our self-boost, or how we can raise up his self-esteem without breaking or without suffering that his self-respect.
So, sir, ideally, we'd like to remove a lot of these stressors that are there that are unnecessary. And if we can actually remove that stress for it to not exist, that would be fantastic. But that's hardly ever possible, right? The stress will be there, and the stress will be there
No, I am
across all
not
spheres
saying that.
of
No,
our
I am not
life,
asking
across
you to
our lifespan. So
remove the stresses. I wanted us
good.
what all positive stresses that child should have that. So we can motivate that stress is very much required, and the parents also we can convey this stress is very much required, because normally they say even if you change this section, one child to another section, then also immediately they give or they come, they are overstressed, and they go with some depression. Immediately they go for depression only without knowing the meaning of depression. So this, how can we avoid?
So I believe that managing stress is a skill, and it's a skill that can be taught to people. Let's take an example of swimming, right? There are two ways of teaching someone how to swim. What happens a lot of times is we just throw the kid into the deep end of the pool, and whoever can learn how to swim, great. But what about the kids who end up sinking or develop such a big fear of that swimming pool that they never want to dive in again? Right? That's based purely on chance, purely on a few people. It's a kind of a survivorship bias, right? Whoever can do it, fantastic, good for them. Let's just work with them and make sure that they become fantastic swimmers. And there are so many kids that it works for us in a sense. But the other approach, and that's the approach that we need to follow, which is that we need to go into the shallow end of the pool with the child, help them get comfortable with the water while we're in the water with them, teach them how to manage it, help them set their expectations of what it's going to feel like, tell them that you're there with them no matter what, and give them the skills and gradually let them reach the deep end of the pool. And a lot less children will be scared of the water. If we are able to do that, they will want to experiment, they'll want to be able to do that. And that's the approach that ideally we should have in all situations. So we can't, rather than switching a classroom suddenly and things like that, we need to make sure what kind of social skills these children already have, how much are they emotionally prepared to be able to deal with a new set of students. Do they know what to expect, what it's going to be like? Some children who are the more extroverted, interactive, confident children might do great and make great friends. But there are some kids who may not have those social skills, who may not have that comfort. If we just change it around and expect them to deal with it, that might actually end up being able to prepare children for the stress that comes their way. A lot of times, I remember when I was stressed, even now when I'm stressed, I tell someone I'm stressed about this and they say, just relax. And it makes me so angry when someone tells me to just relax when I'm stressed, because I could have, if I could have, I would have. I don't enjoy this, right? But you need to tell me how to relax. You need to be with me. You need to hear me out. You need to guide me with the steps. You need to understand that what I'm experiencing is difficult. And I know it's difficult and it will require a very intensive approach. But whatever the stress is, and the stress is not in our control, but we need to have an attitude that managing stress, building resilience are skills that can be taught, and we should focus on teaching them to the kids before we expose them into a situation where they are required to have these skills as much as possible.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.
I have one quick question, Divya, which has been messaged to me, and I think it's a good question.
Sure.
How to deal with kids who don't want to play? Too lazy, so they become obese.
Okay. So two things. One, I think find what they enjoy doing, and what they enjoy doing, that definition doesn't need to match with what our definition of enjoying doing would be. If they enjoy reading, let them read. If they enjoy music, let them get involved in music. If they enjoy studying, there should not be any one specific thing that is done. So that is one. And the second, I think, is our own role modeling, which is so important. We need to introspect on how active we are as adults, as parents in the house. When we come back after a day's work, do we go out and play a sport? How many of us would be willing to spend 500 rupees to book a court to play on the weekend as compared to watching a movie or going out to a restaurant to eat something, right? So a lot of it is about that also. Kids learn by observing. And unfortunately, in the kind of environment where we've created, physical activity, sports, playing are not things that adults really reinforce in their own behavior. We sit in front of the TV, we watch streaming shows, we spend time on social media, and then we get agitated when our kids don't want to move off the couch. So that's something that we need to reflect on and introspect on, and we need to make sure that we are doing it. If parents go out and actually play a sport, kids will go out and play a sport. I
think well
the
said.
percentage of kids who
Absolutely.
will not go is going to be very, very limited. And just to give you another example, yes, and just to elaborate on that, I don't know how many of us have been punished where our punishment has been doing sit-ups or having to take a round of the field, right? What are we telling the kids? Exercise is punishment. Such not the greatest. You're letting me go and run around in the field rather than having to sit in the classroom. But those are the things that, you come late for practice and make you run extra 2 rounds. They're saying exercise is an unpleasant experience. And exercise doesn't have to be an unpleasant experience. Playing sports, being outdoors, have to be pleasant experiences, and that's the kind of role modeling that will happen. So if we're able to do these two things, I think that kids will be a lot more active.
Perfect.
And then we will win a lot more medals.
Yes. And before that, we will, I mean, the way that the question was that we will not be lazy anymore, I would say, right? That was the larger question. Okay, so any other question? Madhuri Arora has a question. Madhuri ji, unmute yourself and please ask your question.
Yes.
Sorry, sir, I'm asking once again. Sir, there is on conflict in my mind also. Ki in this lockdown days, we always see stay positive. सबको positive रहना चाहिए. There are many programs, many missions. We can say कि every day something on stay positive, think positive. As teachers, as person, we know कि plus and minus, positive and negative, both are important in life. And this lockdown has taught us that we should stay calm rather than stay positive. So my question is ki how we can teach this to children ki staying calm is more important than staying positive or negative. Uh, this is just my question as well as my conflict, my confusion also, sir, to Divya ma'am and to you.
Sure,
sir.
sure. Yeah. Divya.
Yes, yes, I agree with you. I think I think feeling happy and feeling sad are part of life. And I think there are times when we will feel happy and we will feel sad. And what you're saying is very right, which is that both of these feelings are often temporary feelings. And a lot of times we need to just let them pass. But a lot of the happy and sad and positive and negative is in our attitude and our approach. Some people have really struggled with this lockdown, while some people have been quite happy and really been able to use that as an opportunity for growth as well. It's about the attitude that we have. It's about the meaning that we have. Again, it's not about the situation being positive or negative, but if we have a positive approach towards that situation, then we will stay calm and we will stay relaxed and we'll be able to take it. Even if there are a few negative days, we'll be able to take it in our stride.
Roshni, you had a question again?
Yes, sir. Thank you so much. Ma'am, I'm sorry, but I have yet a very important question which I'd like to know. Ma'am, what about when it comes to dealing with stress, especially with the children who are facing board exams? We do keep telling them, that calm down, meditate, follow muscle relaxation, go out and get into engaging yourself into any such activity that, calms down, brings calmness in your mind and body. Go out and talk to your friends, seek help whenever you feel is needed. But then, other than all these strategies, ma'am, what do you think could have been more better ways of letting students to face stress in a much better way? How do we appraise this situation?
I think that this is something that's going to be a slightly long. There are two aspects to it. One is the immediate relaxation, which we'll discuss, and one is the overall attitude. I remember this started happening. I was in the 9th grade, and every time I would go to a get together, some auntie uncle would say, "Oh, next year boards." And then I was in the 10th grade, and then someone would say, "Oh, this year boards." And then I was in the 11th grade, and someone said, "Next year boards." And then I was in the 12th grade, and someone said, "Oh, this year boards." It's the only conversation people know how to have when you're that age. And that is something that, as much through conversation as we can, as much as through these awareness sessions, with a lot of parents, everyone, all adults, is something that we need to keep on doing so that that's not made into such a monster that people fear. Again, all exams need to be treated exactly the same way. So whether it's a quiz, whether you're just studying for a practice test, whether it's a match that you're playing, whether it's a dance performance that you're doing, all of it needs to be given the same seriousness so that practice and competition feel the same way. And that's an attitude change that needs to be brought about. A lot of times kids come to us only in the 12th grade when they're very, very anxious. And we just wish that if they had come to us when they were in the 10th grade or the 9th grade, we could have actually worked with them on being able to shift their attitude. And that's something that we need to really catch on and help children with the skills to be able to deal with that stress. And that's a long-term thing. In the short run, most of what you're doing is pretty much all we can do, which is that, yes, you stick to a cycle, you focus on your effort, what you can control. Make sure that you sleep enough, at least 6 to 9 hours at night, preferably. Stay away from caffeine, stay away from nicotine, all substances. Take a break, spend time exercising, meet your friends, talk to them, talk to family members, participate in your extracurricular activities, take regular breaks. And if you're still struggling, make sure that you talk to someone, you reach out, a parent, a teacher, a counselor, a helpline, if nothing else. But make sure that you stay connected and you have someone or the other that you can continue talking to no matter what. And just keep reminding them that the effort is the only thing that matters. Results do not.
Ma'am, thank you so very much. But then again, coming back to the same question, even like when I'm working in a school, why do we hear not only from the parents but also from the school fraternity? Almost all the institution working local, we do are concerned a little academic performance when it comes to board classes.
Yes.
If a child is in grade 9th and 11th, we are like, it's okay. You need not to worry. Calm down. If you are not in a board class, next year we need to focus more. This year you can go the way you want to. But next year you need to make sure that you are regular, you are disciplined, you are punctual, on time, and you get it done at a stride, no matter what. Why do we ourselves, when we should practice what we preach, and until unless if we don't get into ourselves, like you talked about modeling behavior, observational learning, like that plays a very important role. But still we as parents, as educators, do often, with when it comes especially to our own kids, we expect a lot from them. So how do you think we should as individuals bring about that change in our own selves, so that the students don't have to listen to what we say, they start modeling our behavior in their real life?
We just change it, ma'am. Some things just have to be done. In some things there are no hows or whys. We just have to do it. Like we have to get up out of our couch and start exercising. No point thinking about why we don't do it or how to make ourselves do it. We just get up and we start doing it. And we check ourselves every time and we make sure what we're communicating to our kids. And as long as we understand the impact that we're having with our sentences, with what we're saying, we'll be fine. So as long as all of us are just becoming a little bit more aware, we give ourselves time, we give ourselves space. We've also been programmed from years and years. We've all gone through it ourselves when we were in school, when we were in college. We do have pressures. Parents still want high results. Schools are ranked based on who gets what results. All of those things also happen. But if we can hold on to our values and just keep reminding ourselves that results are short term, performance and effort are long term, and I'll do the best that I can. And we just try and do it.
But then how do you think that this can be equally, transformed and communicated to the school authority? Because when we have a meeting, the year-end meeting after the board results are out, you can't just go about simply saying them that, sir, let's not focus on the results, that's short-lived. Let's focus on the value system.
So ma'am, what I think is that if we focus on efforts, results will come. Like I said, my aim is still to win the gold medal at the end of the day. My aim is still to make sure that our kids reach wherever they want to reach. And if we are able to absorb that stress, whether it's coming from the top, whether it's coming from anywhere else, and we have our own support systems to be able to do that, the end goal is still for the child to not just be happy, but be successful also. And we're not losing sight of that in our efforts.
Thank you. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Soma Bhattacharjee, your question, please.
Well, ma'am, good evening, and I'm very happy. I'm coming from a very, very far off state. But when I listen to everyone, I find the problem is just all the same. So my question is, can't we avoid the word stress, which our forefathers or grandparents never heard of it? So the stress is a part of life. So if I do not mention the word stress and I say, it's okay, fine, it's a part of the growing and we will be, don't you feel that it will lighten the burden than what we are thinking today, depression, stress, those terms? So, ma'am, how do you react to this opinion of mine?
I like
the
it.
Same thing without mentioning. Thank you.
a lot of work is now actually focusing on the meaning and the interpretation of stress, which is that stress should not be treated as a bad word, because it will take us a while to eliminate stress from vocabularies. And that's something that's going to be a long run process. Yes, how much we talk about it, how much we talk about the negative part of stress versus how much we talk about the fun and the challenge of it, is something that's going to be a lot more in our control. But there are enough studies now that suggest that if you look at stress as a positive feature, which it is, because stress is a part of our survival mechanism, right? It was designed as a survival tool to help us fight threats, to help us survive. And we need to not lose sight of that.
Thank you so much, ma'am.
Good question, Sumaji. Seema Chaudhary, your question?
Yeah, and thank you so much. A very good evening, everyone. And it's always lovely to participate. Just one small thing I'd like to mention, and I'd like to know ma'am's opinion about it. I sometimes feel that the stress is not student generated, but it's parent generated. So would it not be better that we start taking some counseling sessions for the parents to teach them, you know, you don't need to burst it out on the child. So many times we see that the child wants to go to the right side, but the parent will literally force and re-counsel them, if I can use that word, to do as they please. How right do you think that is? There is no free will, it seems. Your
Yes,
opinion?
parents, of course, have a very, very big role to play. I think as educators, we just need to keep talking and keep saying what we're saying, and
Yeah.
stick to our guns and keep doing it again and again and again. And if we can change even a couple of parents' attitudes out of the hundreds that we speak to, we need to treat that as a victory. And if we just keep doing that long enough, and all of us together, you know, being on this platform, if all of us as educators can decide that we are going to do this, you know, there'll be a lot more strength in that, and hopefully that will cascade into something. Attitude change is it's a long-term process. It's not something that can come about instantly. It's something that we need to change over the years.
Hmm.
You know, we don't prepare for just the 2020 Olympics. We prepare for the 2028 Olympics actually, and that's how you win your medals, right? So
Yeah.
we need to be prepared for the long haul and just keep on doing it, because that's what we believe in.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Ma'am, in our school, actually, we do have you know, hand-holding session for the parents when they join in for the school. But what we have seen over the past few years is a lot of them would avoid कि अरे हमको नहीं चाहिए, हमको मालूम है कैसे करना है. So I know we cannot make it mandatory, but do you think it is a good idea to have these kind of sessions, you know, throughout or at least once in a year, so that this unnecessary pressure on the child does not build up?
Yes, I think we should, and I think we should start it as young as possible. And I think that the rationale of it needs to be very, very clear. And again, as a school also, parents need to be able to see the connection between their child being able to focus on the effort and not on the result, and the child actually getting the results.
Yeah.
You know, if we're able to scientifically and clearly explain that to them, and if they're able to see those results, then that is key. Because we, you know, like sir said, competition is going to be there. We can't create a bubble for children, a bubble that will not, that, you know, they'll have to at some point come out of, and then they'll struggle with. That's really not the point. But if we can explain and drive home the logic of the fact that this is the way to actually attain success,
Correct.
that is the part we need to really focus on.
Yeah. Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you for putting it into the correct perspectives, ma'am.
One question, I think the final question as well, which was sent to me on a chat window. There is a typical silence and reluctancy in few students, maybe due to isolation from their friends. What can we do for it?
Could you repeat that? What kind of
There is
reluctance?
a typical silence and reluctancy in few students, maybe due to the isolation from their friends. Maybe they're not meeting, or because of this COVID, I believe, right? How can we, or say, what can we, how can we negate it possibly? I think that's the better way of, right? Sadhna ji, that's your question. If you want to elaborate on that, possibly you can do that. Yeah. But however, you can please try to answer.
So social isolation is something that is a cause of serious concern. I think this time more than ever has taught us how important relationships are for us. And this has to be a time of physical distancing, but not emotional or social distancing. Children need to be encouraged to interact with their friends. I think that's the biggest advantage of these online classes, are the fact that kids have a routine and that they're getting to interact further with their classmates and still have something in common to talk about. I think that is absolutely key, something that we need to focus on. Interactions with friends should be prioritized, right? We should encourage people, even if their exams, whatever's happening, to do that. At the same time, for children who are feeling awkward about it, who are struggling, social skills training is something that we need to work on, talking to them about what their struggles are, why they're not being able to talk to their friends. Someone who's isolated, not talking to friends, is a sign that this child may be struggling, and we need to definitely make it a point to intervene and to understand. And at the same time, our own relationship with this child, so that they know that they're not alone, that they have someone to talk to, is extremely important. So if someone is isolated, we encourage them, if it's a lifestyle thing, to make sure that they talk to their friends. If not, we understand their struggle. If social skills training is required, we do that. If there's some other concern happening, we intervene, and we make sure that we communicate with them and they have a channel where they can keep talking to us.
Deepji, your question. Divya, we are just 10 minutes ahead of your schedule, but you are wonderfully answering the question. So there are more questions which are coming in. Deepji, your question. Yes. Unmute yourself.
Good evening, everyone. I know it's a very positive time, and I had to say so many things basically. Viva ma'am, I am of the very straight opinion that we are saying that the most important lessons of life are learned in the grounds, not in the classrooms. The most important lessons of life are learned in the grounds, not in the classrooms. I'm a big fan and a big followers of it. So I think I can understand what you said rather much more clarity than many people altogether. I do have to share something that at times we as principals or the teachers or the parents fail to convey the purpose of anything we do to the children. We thoroughly fail in informing, explaining them that why are they supposed to do this. We ask them to do it. And then we try to attach these things with medals and let's say some kind of first, second, third prizes, and we lose out the whole purpose of doing it. This is what my personal feeling is. Similarly, you were asking that many adults are not playing. I rather would like to ask all my colleagues that how many of us really go to grounds and play ourselves with the children, the principals, the teachers and whatnot. Because asking a parent to take one child out, it is better I go and play with 40 in one go. It becomes a talk of the town and it makes a lot of difference. Personally, I'm a boarding school principal, so I can understand. I have played with them in the grounds, to the squash rooms, to swimming pool, to everywhere altogether, including dining hall, throwing plates here and there. It was comfortable altogether. So that's what are my personal points. One very beginning you were talking about to live in present, and I'm very big fan of it personally. But when somebody has to take a call, that what decision he has to take, the future always try to bother him. So somebody has to be trained enough to not only live in present, but don't take his eyes off from the future. This is what I thought I will put across to you. I have very less of time as I can understand. So if you can reflect on any of the few points, it'll be wonderful.
And I think you must be a very popular principal, and your students must have a very fantastic relationship with you if you are playing sports with them.
No, I just complimented by saying that I haven't found kids around me having stress.
Okay.
All right. I've never seen parent coming and trying to bombard his child. My teachers do not work as agents of parents. They try to fulfill the unrequired demands of the parents in the child. This is what I think I can assure you, because I could understand what is the reality of life, and we were practicing all this which is being talked about. I'm so happy to meet you. In fact, Mr. Gaurav, I think we should have these things being talked about much more and more. Ma'am Dubey, I don't mind. The commercialization of everything has become so much that you speak a word, we will have shops tomorrow. I remember how the robotics came into the country and went off. Now the new thing, AI has come, and 3 weeks earlier, the coding has come. There's every shop available for buying all these things. And we are being forced to buy all these things. We are commercializing everything. And I'm sure, we're not very sure that a few days later, we will have shops of stress management. All right, I can see how many people will talk about stress management. That's what my personal feeling is. I'm sorry, but I probably.
They're already there, sir. They are already
They're already there.
Can't take the economics out of things, can we?
True.
So, but yes, no, I think I would love to see my school principal playing on the grounds with me. I'm imagining her right now. That would be such a fantastic sight, and I hope that would be really, really nice if teachers, parents, everyone.
You see, ma'am, we have ceremonious games like teachers, staff, children matches. This is once in a year. That is ceremonious. They will not create an attitude, an aptitude, an atmosphere around it. Okay, the competition can't be once in a year. We have so many prizes distributed only on the annual day. It should be done on every day in every classroom. Then the positivity comes. This is what my feeling is there. I don't know, is it right with everybody else or not? Mr. Gaurav, one last thing, you'll be surprised to know that in class 3 or 1, people have International Heritage Day. Can it make a sense to a child even in class 10 the meaning of heritages? And we have a competition on poster making on that. And we feel proud of it. That's what I'm saying, that we do things which have no meaning all around. The parents are making posters, cutting and pasting, a child is getting prize. We are outsourcing his ability to do something, man.
In fact, I should bring this to, because as I said, I would rather like to stay silent on these matters, but I would rather like to say one observation, which I've really been surprised to hear.
Yeah.
Teachers messaging me, in fact, because I'm talking about IPN as a context, that they attend a session and they want a certificate for it. I don't know. I said, why? Firstly, certificates should be given a weightage that, okay, that I have earned a certificate for something. Just purely I attended a session should be given a certificate. So as I said, there is too much of, I think, sir, which I think Mr. Murli ji or one of the ladies was also sharing. In fact, Sharma ji was sharing that number one, we have become very soft in our approach somehow. We do not call spade a spade. And we somehow try to sugarcoat everything. So sadly, because of all this, we are in a very mutually admiring society, if I may say. We really do not appreciate certain things which should be called out in a certain manner. Anyway, that's a very, very different discussion. But then I really wanted to quickly come back to what we were doing. So the way you were answering, and I'm so sorry that I had to barge in with my sort of
I'm also sorry if I've gone beyond.
No, not at all.
No, I don't think there was an answer. I appreciate your point of view. And yes, I do think that while the present is important, planning for the future is important. We need to have a long-term perspective. Life can't be led just by what's going to happen 10 seconds from now. So while we're planning and prioritizing, we prepare for the future. But while we're executing, we focus on the present.
Very nice. Very nice. I think those are the best words. Thank you.
Okay, so Divya, wonderful. And thank you, Deep ji, in fact, and all the other dignitaries who were part of this session. I think your composure, your calmness is a trait everyone should follow, Divya. Very well. You're a young individual, but you are very composed. So we all, in fact, I've been getting a lot of messages that they already like you. I won't say they love you, but then certainly like you. Having said this, wonderful having you. We hope to have you back when we do the Saturday session with Mr. Parekh as well. So I want to, as I said, wonderful session. Everyone who joined in, thank you very much. And we continue our sessions tomorrow as well. We join at 5 p.m. sharp. And thank you very much for your valuable feedback. We would like to improve this as we go along. Divya, wonderful having you. All the very best for your future. Take care. Bye-bye. Thank you, Divya.
Thank you. Thank you, Gaurav sir. Thank you.